So welcome back to my channel. This is Gamer Dom and another one of these noobs guides, beginners guides to World of Tanks, and the different classes of vehicles in the game. So I've covered off light and scout tanks, I've covered off artillery, everybody's favourite class, and now I thought I'd move on to the fat boys, the heavy tanks. Except there's all different types of heavy tanks, so this will be probably a two-parter, maybe even a three-parter. I have to see how it goes, because you have tanks like this thing, the VK100, which is clearly a fat boy based on slow-moving, heavy armoured, etc, etc. That's the kind of nature of the beast that it is, versus something like, ooh, let's see, how about this one, the French FCM 50T, also classified as a heavy tank, but nowhere near the same kind of beastie. This is more of a lighter weight, faster moving heavy tank. Then again, you get other things like auto-loading heavies, such as the Swedish Emil. Again, classified as a heavy tank, but this is not the same beast again. This has an auto-loader and relies on burst fire to cause damage. So we're going to start first of all with the fat boys. So the fat boys, there's several different versions of these out there, and as I say, the main difference about these is the fact they have heavy armor. They're sort of, if you like, their raison d'etre, the reason for being out there is protection of the crew. They're there to brawl and to fight it out, and they're at all levels. So you've got the KV1 down at tier 5. Sorry, this is a for a tier 5 is extremely well armoured and will bounce an awful lot of shots. Hull armour 75, 75, 70, turret 110, 110, 110, and you know, when this thing goes up against things comparable tier tanks, it will stand and duke it out. That's what it's for. You get things like, let's move on to something higher tier. So here you go, T29. So this thing is a slight variation of the heavy tank. It has not so great hull armor, only 102 millimeters at the front, 76 and 51 at the side, but a whacking great slab of steel on the turret. 279 is pretty much impenetrable for, well, most tanks it's going to face if you keep that turret facing towards it. So it's very difficult to do a blanket guide to heavy tanks, because a T29, when it's top tier, can be a bully, can be like the VK, can be using that very reasonable frontal armor. However, as a tier 7, it will go up against tier 9s, and then that frontal armor is not going to play that much a bigger deal for you. So the golden rule with heavy tanks is there is no golden rule. There are different types of heavy tanks, and even within that, depending on where you are tiered, will affect how you play this tank. So as I say, this T29 is a brute when it's top tier. When it's not, you have to play it much different. You have to play and use that really good turret and gun depression, and use it much more as a mobile, snipey, hull down threat, where even the higher tier tanks can't deal with you. Same to some degree with even things like the slow moving VK. This thing has 200 millimeters of frontal armor, 130 at the side, 230 turret armor, which you think is pretty good, and it is. If you can angle this a bit, it will bounce all kinds of shells. However, when you get this thing, which is tier 8, into a tier 10 game, you're going to have to play it. If you go and duke it out with an IS-7 or one of the other tier 10 heavy tanks, you are going to come off worse. And so you do need to be very, very cognizant of what the map, what the battle is like, where you are in the standings, who you are up against, because you have to dictate your gameplay according to how they are. But the bottom line is the fat boys are there because of their armor. That's what their design was. These tanks were designed to, in reality, were designed to take maximum punishment with the least amount of impact and effect on the crew inside. They were designed to be breakthrough tanks, and if you think of them as breakthrough tanks, then you're probably going to play them better than you would otherwise do. There is no point, absolutely no point, sitting back and sniping from range with something like this. Your gun is just not good enough to do that. It's not designed for it. Let's look at the gun on this thing. I'm picking on the VK because it's a good example of this, and I've seen people try and snipe with this thing. But look at the accuracy. 0.4 dispersion. 0.4. That's terrible. That's like a derp gun. Okay, it's a 128mm shell, and it's got reasonable penetration, 220 penetration. It's okay, 440 average damage, but you're talking accuracy of 0.4 and aim time of 2.7. So sitting back and sniping with this thing is not, repeat, not something you should ever do. Now, I know people do it because either they don't understand the basic things about how to play these tanks, but also they do it because they think, well, I've got no chance against a tier 10, I'll load up HE and I'll sit back and fire from distance. But the point is, you'll be spotted because these things generally have terrible camo values. Let's have a look at this thing. 3.25 when stationary with this tank. You know, you will be spotted from wherever you happen to be, and camping in this thing is just a completely pointless exercise. So heavy tanks are heavy tanks. You need to get them in up close and personal. They need to brawl. They need to use their armor, and you need to angle them. Now, angling is an art in World of Tanks that newer players struggle with. I struggle with it myself from time to time. And it takes practice. But basically, the rule of thumb is, if you have pretty reasonable side armor and you have very good frontal armor, if you angle the shell so that, or angle the tank so that, imagine I'm the enemy tank firing at this VK, by angling it like this, there's a good chance that anything hitting the front plate here will just ping off because of the angle. Similarly, if I hit it in the side plate, it's thick enough armor that it's actually made even thicker by the fact it's angled, and the shell will bang off. Doesn't always happen, but it's a pretty good chance. And even if it doesn't bounce off, it'll be eaten by the tracks and not actually do any damage to the vehicle itself. So that's the principle of angling, and you need to learn that if you're going to play the big fat boys out there. They require you to be aware of where you are going, so you do not want to, unless you absolutely can avoid it, you do not want to be going into big wide open spaces. You want to be going in close and getting dirty. Now, as I say, it's difficult when you are not top tier, because your armor is likely to get penned by all the tier 9s and tier 10s you're going to face if you're in this VK. But you can bounce a fair bit, and still by being aggressive, by pushing the enemy, using your health pool, because that's the other thing heavy tanks tend to have. They have quite large health pools for their tier. So this has 1,700 hit points at tier 8, which is pretty good chunk of change. There's a TD, I forget now. Well, in fact, if you look at the new French light tank, the ELC Even 90, that has half that. 800 it has, more than half that. So, you know, this thing can take a shot even when you're being penned by heavy tanks. And the reality is, if you are going up against heavy tanks and you're doing damage to them, you're getting much more XP than you would otherwise get. So heavy brawling tanks, you need to be heavy brawling tanks, and it's a dead giveaway when you look at them, because their accuracy of their guns is not that great. Here we go. This is a Russian. This is new Russian Object 257. Accuracy 0.4 dispersion. Aim time 2.9 dispersion. It's a brawler. It's not for standing off. Let's have a look at. Well, we won't go type 4s and no-hos because they're obviously so. Here we go. Another one you see very often doing the wrong thing. This is the Chinese tier 8 premium heavy tank, the 112, based on the IS-3. Again, it's a brawler. Look at this. 0.46 dispersion at 100 meters. 3.4 aim time. So it takes 3.4 seconds for that reticule on your gun when you're aiming at a target to get small enough that the accuracy is going to be pretty good, or it's going to be as good as it's going to be. And even then, its dispersion is so bad that even if you fully aimed in, chances are you'll miss the barn that you were trying to fire at. So it's really, really important. More than any, I mean, it's always important, and one of the biggest things I would say to new players in the game and inexperienced players in the game: study your tank. Look at the tank before you click that battle button. Look at it and say, what sort of tank is this? How does this tank play? What's my assessment of how this tank's going to play? Because that will dictate how you play it. You look at this thing, survivability, frontal armor is 120, and look how well angled that is. That's really well angled. And the turret 240. Now if I go and look at, so what's that, 120 and 240. Let's have a look at another tier 8. What shall I look at? Okay, let's look at the Tiger 2. Tiger 2. Definitely a heavy tank, but look at its armor. 150, and it's much more steeply angled. So it's flatter for anybody shooting. Turret 185. This is not a brawling tank. It's not. This is a sniping tank, and funny enough, you look at its gun, accuracy 0.31, aim time 2.5. It's a giveaway, right? That's a giveaway. So you need to study your tank and find out what kind of heavy tank it is, what type of medium tank, even what kind of light tank it is. That's the one thing you need to check on. And the big brawlers are very easy to spot. They have pretty good armor, and they have very inaccurate guns. And it tends to be the Russian tanks. They tend to be designed to be that kind of thing. Here we go. This is the tier 6 T150. Again, accuracy of the gun 0.45, aim time 3.4. Because it's a brawler. It's not a stand back and shoot type of tank. This is another one that you need to get in the face of people. IS-3, still one of the best tier 8 heavy tanks, tier for tier, in the game. Heavy tank, tier for tier, you know what I mean. One of the best tanks in the game, tier for tier, and certainly one of the best tier 8s still. Accuracy of the gun 0.4, aim time 3.4. But armor wise, 110, pretty well angled, in fact very well angled apart from that lower plate, and 249 turret. That's the giveaway. So check your tank, so look it up, see how it plays. You get other tanks that are a bit more crossover. So IS, tier 7 Russian heavy tank, one of my favourite in the game. Love this thing. But this thing actually hasn't got the best armour in the world. It's not really an armoured behemoth like the VK is. I mean, okay, this is a tier 7, but you look at that armour value, it's 220, sorry, 120 if it was 220, I'd love that. 120 at the front. And look how flat, particularly this area here around this hatch is. It can be penned really, really easily. Sure, if somebody hits this upper plate, it's probably going to bounce off because of the angling. And even with, whoops, even with this track at the bottom here, its lower plate is like Swiss cheese. Even its turret, 100mm, is not that great. And you look at its gun, 0.46 accuracy, 3.4 aim time. So although this thing is very much gunned like a heavy tank, like a big breakthrough tank, it's not. And this is where other things you need to look at with your tank. You need to look at things like its mobility. How good is it at moving around? This thing has a top speed of 34, which actually for a heavy is very, very good. And its traverse speed, hull traverse, is excellent. Nearly 40 degrees per second. Okay, I've got a good crew on this, but still, that's very good. Power ratio of nearly 15 is very good as well. So this thing gets around the battlefield, which again, if you've studied your tank, if you've played it a few times, you'll get to realise that this thing, yes, it wants to go and get up close because of that accuracy of the gun, but it can't rely on its armour. Even when it's top tier, it can't really rely on that armour. Therefore, you need to use that bit of mobility, get in close, pop out, boom, use the big boomstick, get back into cover while it reloads, because yeah, funny enough, it's got a big boomstick. It takes a long time to reload. Takes well, it doesn't tell me on there, but it's only got a 4.88 rounds per minute rate of fire. So again, just because it's a heavy tank with a poor gun or poor accuracy gun doesn't mean automatically it's a brawler. Again, check your tank, look at the different values of it, work it out. Another example for you. This is another premium tank, a tier 6 premium heavy tank, but there's nothing heavy about it really. This is the VK122. You know, looks like the IS, but that's just laziness on the part of World of Tanks, frankly. Has a very, very good gun. It has the same gun as the IS, 0.46 dispersion, 3.2 aim time, 170 millimeters of penetration. Pretty darn good for this tier of tank. But look at his armor. Actually, it's a tier 7. I apologise. Look at its armor. 75 millimeters of frontal plate armor, and 60 at the side and 60 at the rear. And again, it's pretty flat. This middle section here, which is probably where most people will aim, is not that well angled. The lower plate, or this plate here, top plate here, is pretty good angling, but 75 millimeters not going to stop much. Turret is the same as the IS, 100 millimeters. But again, look at its mobility. This thing has a 700 horsepower engine with a 14.83 power ratio, which is pretty reasonable, top speed of 42, and a traverse speed of 44.13 degrees per second. So yes, it's got the boomstick, but does it go toe to toe with the enemy? No, it does not. It certainly does not. So you need to study your vehicle. You need to see what it's like. You see what its characteristics are. Key things with heavies is its armor profile. How good is that armor? But not just how good is it, how well angled is it? How well sloped is it? Is it likely to block shells? Is it not likely to block shells? Then the next thing to look at is its boomstick. What's the gun like on it? Is it a low alpha? I say alpha, I mean damage. How much damage does it actually do typically per shot? You look at this. Actually, this is a bad example. Let's go back to the IS-3. Here we go. Tier 8 heavy tank. Average damage per shot is 390, but it only fires 4.51 rounds per minute. You then go to something like a British, and you'll get to know the national characteristics of vehicles. That British guns tend to be high penetration, low alpha, and indeed that's the same with this Carnarvon, which is an extremely good heavy tank. Almost double the rate of fire, 9.2 rounds per minute, but its alpha is only 280 per shot, 220 average penetration. So again, you look at the style of tank. This thing doesn't have a huge amount of armor. Turret's very good. 130 millimeters frontal armor is actually not bad at all. It's been seriously buffed in recent times. So I'm in danger of getting a bit bogged down here, so let's cut it off there. So the main thing to say is, and it's the same with all classes of tanks, right? You need to look at your strengths and weaknesses. You need to compare it with other tanks. Wargaming have a very handy compare tool down here that you can click, and you can compare different tanks with different tanks to see what their characteristics are like. And the other thing is, stick to a tank. When you're new, relatively inexperienced in the game, try and stick to one or two tanks. You know, it's nice to have variety in games, but if you jump around too much, you'll forget what the characteristics are, what the play style is of those vehicles. So stick to one or two or three and just play those for a bit, and get used to them. Get used to how they play, the style of play. So anyway, without further ado, let's go and watch a couple of games of people playing the bruisers, the breakthrough heavy tanks, and show how they work. So as an example, let's have a look at our old mate Cobbler Goblin. Sent a few games in the past to the channel, one of my subscribers, and he is in a fairly okay matchup actually. He's in the Tier 5 Chinese Super Obese OI Experimental. The OI Experimental was, well, he used to be a real monster. Been nerfed a fair bit in recent times. Still a very, very capable heavy tank, particularly when you are, well, top tier or middle tier, and he's middle tier this time. They're on Swamp, which is not the best map for a thing like this. And you can see it's a lot of heavies involved. Now, one of the things you'll encounter when you play heavies, if you keep your chat on, which I don't anymore, is players bitching at you because you haven't gone the heavy route. Right? There are sort of areas in the map where they're kind of designated, inverted commas, areas that heavy tanks should go to, right? On this map, Swamp, it's sort of traditional for heavy tanks to head down the 1, 2, 3 area. And there's good reason, really, because it's the least open area. You can get here in a slow-moving vehicle pretty quickly, well, reasonably well, without being seen and therefore shot at. See, Cobbler's got all this way. He's almost, you know, halfway across the map, hasn't been seen, and hasn't seen anyone. So he's got into a position where he can play up close and dirty. If he'd gone up the north area down to sort of, or down the A line to where that Struntwagen has just died, the chances are he wouldn't get there before he was spotted and then probably shot apart as he got there. So instead he's using the heavy as as it's intended. This is a brawling heavy tank. Lots of thick armour, a pretty derpy kind of gun, and here we go. First shell into that VK-30H, who's trying to fire heat at him but is never going to pen this guy. And look at this, bang, straight through his side. He's got this OI Experimental angled quite nicely. Even though that guy is firing heat, he's not doing a bit of damage to us. And we're just working him over. That thing is a poor, poor tank, unfortunately. Not heavy. So the Churchill next. Just track him in place. Again, up close. See, most engagements in heavy tanks should happen within 100 meters, something like that. You shouldn't be firing. I mean, exceptions, right? There's exception in everything. But generally, you want to get close. There's a Matilda Black Prince. He's got the gun that can pen, but you see he's doing very, very little damage. He's a medium tank, after all. Look at that. We're doing 100 and something on him. He's doing 50 on us, 80 on us. His rate of fire is considerably better than ours, though. But we're just working him over. Up close, personal, taking hits. Don't be afraid to take hits when you're in a heavy tank. And that's what they have a big hit pool for. That's why they have a lot of health. Is because they're designed with their armour and hit points in combination to sort of take a few hits and survive long enough to make a difference. Keep firing their gun. So we're winning the south. The north has pretty much fallen, however, and there goes Panzer IV. So this is not looking good for the game. Now the other problem is once you've committed in a heavy, it's quite difficult to get back into the main battle. Excelsior's really got very little chance with that pop gun, and he looks like he's firing out armor piercing, which is a real shame. Oh, Cobbler, you should have done a ram there. That would have been another good thing about, you know, heavy tanks. If they got the weight and they've got a bit of armor, ramming the enemy is a really good tactic. So we've killed everything down here. The only enemy tanks left, maybe an artillery back here somewhere, but everything else is in the north. You can see the VK-30H, the Cromwell B and the Hellcat are all up there, and there's only Grilly left. So the challenge is, will they manage to get anywhere to take advantage of it? Now, no, Hellcat's almost in the base, but our Churchill is playing it safe, which is a good thing. He's hopped on the cap. Looks like the T1 is going to as well. Let's speed this up a little bit. So what do we get? Enemy have taken down our... Oh no, the T1 is not going in the cap. Now then, let's see a bit of long range fire from a OI. Yeah, oh, it hit him. Blimey. See how long he had to aim that shot. Not really what he's in for. That's not really what you're trying to do in it. I mean, the circumstances like this means it's worth it just to keep those guys. And they're trying to block the enemy team getting towards the cap. That's what he's trying to do. He's sitting out here. He's saying, come on, you've got to get past me. Oh, loopy shell there. You've got to take me on. And he's doing a great job. He's using his hit pull, even though he's getting penned. Oh, didn't lead that shell enough. Even though he's getting penetrated, he's using his hit pull, and it's a win. So that was an ace tanker for him. He got bruiser, he got duelist, he got fighter, he got fire for effect, shell proof, and steel wall. Finished up second on his team. 1673 damage, 4 kills, 1095 base XP. Fired 15 shots, hit with 13, did damage with 13. Took 13 hits himself, only 5 of which penned, 8 did not. So he blocked 1500 damage and made 37,500 credits, 30.5 after costs, and 1600 XP. So you could see there he was middle tier, but he knew that his tank had the armor to deal with most of the heavies that were in the enemy team, and he went down and he fought it up close and personal. It was only towards the end when he was trying to stop the enemy getting to his cap, or to their cap, that he started to try and snipe at distance. And really that's the rule of thumb with heavy obese tanks like these things. They're there to block. They're there to fight it out close. They're there to exchange their armor and hit points after, in exchange for, you know, dealing damage. And that's what he did. He took 13 hits, only 5 of which penned. So the armor did its job, and the HP, when he did get penned, soaked it up because they have a lot more hit points than others. And he dished out the damage, did all that damage, finished with an ace tanker. So this is Saint is back. I love that name. Driving the French Tier 8 premium heavy tank. It's basically the Liberté is what it is. Although he hasn't got the stupid French Liberté colours, so it's the what's it called? AMX M449. Now this thing, I love this tank myself. It's a really nice heavy tank. Very, very thick frontal armour. But its downside is it doesn't have very good side armour, and it has a great big cupola on top, which is, there you go, which is very, very thin and easy to pen. So here we are on Fisherman's Bay. He's taking a very aggressive stance. Now some people would get very antsy about a heavy tank coming out to this flank. He got spotted. But the thing about this tank is, because its side armour is so utterly garbage, you can't really side scrape in a city, which is where you would traditionally go with a heavy tank. You need to keep your front moving forward. You need to keep it like, it's a bit like the Super Pershing American Tier 8 medium. Well, really a heavy, but it's classed as a medium. This thing is very similar in that both have very, very good frontal armour. And you need to keep it pointing forward. You need to keep moving as well. It's a faster breakthrough tank. It's quicker than things like the Malbecker or the VK 100, those kind of things. But a really, really good frontal. There you go. Blocked the first shot from the T43. Not surprising, that thing hasn't got the best gunner in the world. Now this is a bit more of a challenge. There's another Tier 8 there. Couldn't get the shot through the VK's sort of front angled plate like that. And I love the fact what he's doing here is being really, really aggressive. Now there's no artillery, so he's able to take advantage of that. Blocks another shot from this 43, who really has no idea where to hit him. Cupola is really what he should be aiming for at this point. Even with that pop gun, he could pen him there. Oh, there's a Chinese TD turned up just at the wrong moment. Went to support that A43 and paid for it in a big way, so we can push on him. Nice shot, he tracks us. Oh, Super Pershing's coming in. Oh, we got hit by something very hard there. You can see, hit in the side, and it took out his loader and his gunner. So he repaired the loader because you need to get shells in the breach as quickly as possible, and again he's bringing his frontal armour forward again. Aiming for the weak spot on the Super Pershing, takes him down even though he was on low health. Good to get the gun out of the game. Nice shot considering he hadn't got a gunner. Blocks again the WZ shot. Now again, you know, there is no artillery, so he's able to do this in impunity, but again it's about knowing your tank. He's keeping his front armour. The one time he didn't keep his front armour forward, he got penned in the side and he lost true crew members, and he's paying the price because of his inaccuracy now. But he's got support and they've bulldozed the enemy there, so now he can push on. Again, heavy tanks in my book, heavy breakthrough tanks, and this is the important distinction, that's what I'm trying to say, between certain tanks and certain heavy tanks. There are different sorts of heavies. These sort of breakthrough heavy tanks are best played by being very aggressive and pushing forward. Sitting back is not really where they're strong. Even, and I repeat, even when they're low tier, they have to keep moving forward. They have to try and bully. They've got the weight, they've got the hit points, they've got the armour again against lower tier, against heavier tier, higher tier tanks. It's not so easy for them, that is for sure, and particularly when there's a lot of gold being spammed around everywhere. But you know, they have that strength, they have that ability. So he's getting spammed left, right and centre on the map by a T10 who thinks he should have been over in the heavy line. Well, you know, just get over yourself. He's cleared this cleared our right flank away, and now he's able to push forward. He's asking somebody to cap, which is a little bit hopeful whether it's only 6.6, but it's a nice shot on the O'Neill's side armour. Gun on this thing is really nice gun. He's getting pushed by somebody, which is not helpful. Ooh, oh, it's an HE shell from the IS-2. Now they need to watch out behind them because there's those enemy tanks that were down in C and D8 could well swing up behind us. We're getting rid of that O'Neill if he can. Oh, there must be some terrain in between. There's an IS-6 coming from our right. Now he's got the shot on the O'Neill. Can we finish him? No, somebody else gets him. Damnation. No, I don't think is he not paying attention to this IS-6 to our left? Now he is. Now a little bit of tunnel vision there, I think. Now we see two workhorses heavy tanks going up against each other. IS-6 is trying to use his mobility but just ends up putting his rear towards us, and we managed to put a nice shell into him, block the return shot, and the IS-6 is down. Bad play from the IS-6. Frontal armour, that's what you got to do. Frontal armour, always keep the frontal armour facing towards the enemy. Now we've got a mass brawl going on in the open field. Not the best environment for tanks. Tried to get one under the lower plate of the 705 but couldn't. But he's finally down. Right, we're losing the game now. Guns out the game. That's what it becomes. Takes out the Hype 59. Trying to protect his side as much as he can because that's the weak spot. Puts a shot into the T29 into his drive wheel. See that? Took out, so would have immobilised him in place, and now he's gone for the skill rounds and would have stopped and done damage. T29 bounces a shot. This is perfect for him. Got a nice position where he can't easily be hit from the flank. Every shell's got to come from the front, and this is the sort of shootout this sort of tank will thrive in. because it's hard for them to hit his weak spot. Ferdinand's resorted to HE, did quite a bit of damage with an HE shell, to be honest, but that's the last thing he'll do. It's done 5,800 damage, really nice game. Need to hit that. Capola takes down the IS-2, lost his tracks but repaired them immediately. Now then, 2 versus 3, there's a Type 4 Heavy and a T-29. T-29's a one-shot, Type 4 Heavy is a little bit more problematic because also... Ah, he's looking right at him. He comes round the corner, he was looking straight at him. Yeah, Type 4 is firing HE, of course. Want to be careful here because you can't block HE. It will do damage. Huh. And I just say that and he manages to block. No, he doesn't. He gets taken out. He gets hit by the HE round. Manages to block his own shot against the Type 4 Heavy. Pushing on these guys. He's not worried about the T-29. And he can't pen the... He's penned and penned and penned this Type 4 Heavy. And you can see him wiggling around trying to avoid his cupola being hit. And luckily somebody else takes him out. Good game. Well played. So that was a cracking game. Obviously that was an ace tanker. He got Hand of God, Spotter, Bruiser, Duelist, Fire for Effect, Fighter, Shellproof, Spartan, Confederate, Steel Wall and High Caliber. Wow, what a selection of medals there. Finished up, unsurprisingly, top of his team. 6,845 damage, 4 kills, 2,132 base XP. Jeez. Fired 34 shots, hit with hit with 31, penned with 25 for that 6,800 damage. He was hit 22 times himself, only 6 of which penned him. 16 bounced for 3,655 blocked. It's because he knew his tank. He kept that armor pointing forward, and you could see he was always looking for ways to cover his side armor. The one time he didn't do it, he got penned. And he lost 2 crew members because he didn't keep his armor facing forward. Heavy breakthrough tanks, it's all about frontal armor, it's all about keeping their armor pointing at the enemy. Now in other types of heavies you can keep it angled a bit and that will actually improve the armor profile. On this particular tank, keeping it straight forward and trying not to over angle at all is a good idea. He also did 2,000 assistance damage, and look at this, nearly 211,000 credit. He was also running some kind of boosts, so he made a profit even after firing some premium of 205, nearly 206,000 credits. Holy smoke. And with the booster and the premium bonus, he got 5,117 XP for that crew. So absolutely monumental. So there you go, a couple of cracking games showing off some heavy tank work. So Dom's golden rules for big fat boys and heavy breakthrough tanks. Be aggressive. It's all about your armor, it's all about your boomstick. You are there to play the role of a breakthrough tank. You are there to get into the face of the enemy, and even if you don't manage to do a huge amount yourself, the very fact that you are pushing the enemy, that you're putting them under pressure, will cause other tanks to come to their aid, and you may well find that you do create that hole. They're called breakthrough tanks for a reason, right? I lose count of the number of times I've played in a big fat heavy and been very, very aggressive, especially something like a Type 5 heavy or Type 4 heavy, which I absolutely adore as tanks, and just bulldoze my way forward. I mean, obviously taking care for you know, where possible TDs might be, if there's artillery, trying to keep in areas that are RT safe, but really being aggressive. And even if I haven't done that much myself, the very fact I've done that, I've created chaos amongst the enemy team, and then they create holes for the rest of my team to push forward and take advantage of. And that's really your role as a heavy tank, and that's kind of the theme of this series of videos. And you know, if you've watched any of the others so far, you'll be aware of this. Is It's about knowing the role of your vehicle, the true role. And don't just say, oh, it's a heavy tank, or just it's a TD, because there are all different types of TDs and heavy tanks, and hopefully you're getting that from these videos. There are big heavy heavies, there are light medium heavies, there are sniper heavies. So you need to know what your tank is capable of, you need to know what the role is it's sort of designed to play in the battlefield. And it's a dead giveaway if it's slow moving and got lots of frontal armor and pretty good boomstick, then it's a breakthrough tank, and therefore you need to play it like that. Don't try and sit and snipe. On rare occasions you may be able to hit things, but the accuracy of these guns is not designed to be fired at from distance. It's designed to get in close and derp somebody in the face, to smash somebody around the chops. There's no subtlety with the heavy tanks, these big heavy tanks. If you want subtlety, go for something in like a medium or a light tank, or one of the faster moving light heavy tanks. But if you want to be just slug it out, smack them in the chops, fight it out until the last man is standing, then the breakthrough tanks, the heavy, super heavy tanks, the heavily armored tanks like the Liberté, are the sort of tank you want to take. Anyway, I hope you found this useful and interesting. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel to get more of these sort of videos and all the other stuff that I put up on the channel. And if you are interested in anything particular, just put something down in the comment section down below. I'll probably do other versions of heavy tanks next, and then don't know whether I'll move on to mediums or TDs one after that. We'll see how it goes. But let me know indeed if there's anything else that you're interested in, or as a newer player, things you've wondered about. As I say, I'm not claiming to be authority on this game. I've just played nearly 40,000 games and played for several years, and I also know about military history and tank history, so it gives me a bit of perspective without being a super unicorn player. I'm just an average player, and this is about what I learned through experience and getting caught out myself on many occasions. So hopefully it's been useful to you all. Anyway, ultimately, as long as you enjoy yourselves, have fun and enjoy the game and play your own game, then that's all that really matters. It's just a game after all. And I will see you again soon. This is Gamer Dom signing out.